throw in the one about depositions down when we're talking about just advice to young lawyers.
Okay, that'd be good.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Is it okay to shut this door, I guess?
Yes, that would be a good idea, probably.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Today is Monday, November 5th, 2007. I'm Mary Margaret Bailey, and I'm in Mobile interviewing Broox Holmes, who served as president of the Alabama State Bar from 1994 to 1995. Mr. Holmes, how old are you and how long have you been practicing law?
Well, let's see, I'm 74. I'll be 75 later this month, and I've been practicing law since 1960.
And where do you practice, and what is the general nature of your practice?
I'm with the firm of Armbrick Jackson here in Mobile. We recently opened an office in Foley, so that's new. And my area of practice is almost entirely civil trial practice.
Where did you grow up, and why did you decide to become a lawyer?
I grew up in Foley, Alabama, and I was a physician's son, a family doctor's son, and I didn't decide to become a lawyer because I couldn't get in med school, like I guess some doctors' sons. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I say always. I told people when I was 12 or 13 or so that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I'm not sure why. I think that I'd seen some lawyers and kind of liked the idea of going to court, that sort of thing.
Let's pause just a second.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Holmes, what led you to run for the position of president of the Alabama State Bar?
I had been involved in bar work, both in the Mobile Bar and the State Bar for several years, including the Judicial Inquiry Commission and other committees, and served on the Board of Bar Commissioners for a number of years, and just like being with the lawyers who worked on those things and past presidents, and I was encouraged to run for the position and decided to do that. I thought I could help with the state bar activities.
Were there any special initiatives that you worked on while you were president?
Well, as I recall, in the first meeting that we had with different folks, was trying to unite the bar. I felt that we had too much divisiveness in the bar, and whether you talk about plaintiffs' lawyers and other lawyers, that sort of thing. I thought that we ought to be all together, and that was one of the things that I think we worked on and we helped accomplish.
And in addition to the leadership positions that you mentioned at local and state bar levels, you've also had leadership positions in the community, such as serving as chairman of the Board of Trustees of St. Paul's Episcopal School, and you were a member of the vestry for St. Paul's Episcopal Church. What do you consider to be keys to successful leadership?
Well, I think that a leader is a difference between being a leader and being a boss. A leader first has to have a plan. He or she has to know what's going to be accomplished and what we want to accomplish here. And I think a key is having everyone involved know what is the heart of the mission of the organization, making them feel that they're a part of the heart of the organization, of the heart of what's going to be done. And when they do that, they'll be more successful, the organization will be more successful, whatever it is. And that's what I think a leader has got to do, is to have everyone on board.
What advice do you have for lawyers who are just beginning their law practice?
Well, lawyers who are beginning, when I go back to when I graduated from law school in 1960, the law school had put on a program called Bridging the Gap, in which they brought older lawyers back in different areas of the law, and kind of gave advice on what to expect in a law practice and what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. And those things are generally not taught in law school, but I think that young lawyers starting out should consult with older lawyers. They should have a plan about what they want to do. They should know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, not necessarily what they want to specialize in, but they need to do whatever they're going to do and do it well. And they ought to communicate with their clients. Communication is key. They ought to know when their client hires them what they're going to do for the client. And they ought to be a key. Another thing key to is being aware of what's important in the community and how they can help out in the community, not just law practice. And know that the practice of law is a privilege. And when they realize it's a true privilege, they're going to be more successful.
Are there any particular habits that you've employed in your practice that you would recommend?
Well, I mentioned having a plan. That's very important. Having a habit of communicating with your client. That means a lot of things, including returning phone calls and returning phone calls promptly, communicating promptly, knowing what your role is in any particular matter. And you have habits of doing that, you're going to be successful.
What pitfalls face new lawyers and how can they avoid them?
Well, I may have mentioned this before, but a new lawyer, quite often when they're retained by a client, there's not a clear understanding between the lawyer and the client as to what is to be done, what is expected of the lawyer and of the client. And you need a clear understanding of what you're being retained for. What is your work? What is your role? And the other thing is they should have a clear understanding of the billing procedure and how it's going to be handled. And if they do those things, they're going to be more successful in their practice. And they need to communicate with the client, keep the client advised of developments in a case or a matter. And they should consult with older lawyers if they think they need some advice on certain matters. And a younger lawyer, particularly a younger lawyer, and this just not younger lawyers, it's starting out, it's older lawyers too. A lawyer should not take on work that he's not equipped to handle. In other words, if you're talking about an antitrust case or something that they're not experienced in, or they should consult others and they shouldn't take it on if they don't feel they can do it. One of the pitfalls for younger lawyers, and you see this a lot in some of the grievances filed with the state bar, is that a lawyer will take on work and take a retainer and either not do the work or not do it on time. And that is a pitfall and one of the complaints that we hear often about younger lawyers.
What is the best thing that you ever did with regard to your law practice?
Well, when I started, we of necessity did a lot of different things, and as far as didn't specialize as much, and that was good in a way. But I think the best thing I did is after a certain time, I began to specialize in civil trial work, and that enabled me to, I think, have a more successful practice and to be focused in an area rather than doing a lot of different things. And I'd say that development helped my practice more than anything else.
What advice do you have for young lawyers in regard to the taking of depositions?
Well, there are books and seminars that they can go to, and on taking depositions, there's a lot of that, and more than I know. But we have so much discovery now, and a lot of the discovery is probably useless. For a deposition, know why you're going to take the deposition. Is it for trial? Is it for discovery, or both? Is it videoed or is it not? Is it, and obviously you have to prepare for a deposition. If the deponent has given a deposition before, you want to get those, and all of these things you should know. But one of the things that a lawyer should know, a young lawyer, any other taking a deposition, is when to ask questions and when not. There are questions you need to reserve for trial that may be a surprise to the deponent that you don't want to give away in a deposition. Now, you take a risk sometimes by not asking them that, but if you know what the answer may be, then you're probably better off reserving that question for trial. That's just one little thing I would suggest.
Okay. Could you please share something that you think is unique or historic about the circuit in which you practice?
Well, here in Mobile County, the 13th Circuit, of course, this is one of the oldest circuits. We have the Mobile Bar Association is the oldest bar association in the state and one of the oldest in the country. And I think that in this circuit, we historically have been had a lot of camaraderie in the bar, and that it used to be that, you know, we didn't need to confirm things with letters. When the lawyer said something in this circuit, that was good. And I think that is still the truth to some extent, but maybe with the growth of the bar, that's not as much as it used to be.
What about, do you have any recollections of a significant legal event from the circuit?
Well, there have been a lot of them. I guess one of the ones that I remember as being significant is when we moved into the new courthouse in 1995, in January of 1995, and I was president of State Bar and had the privilege of speaking on that occasion. And so I remember that, how we talked about old times in the old courthouse, which of course was not the oldest courthouse here, but we moved to the new courthouse in January 1995, and I thought that was significant.
Okay. What about your recollections of a memorable lawyer from the circuit?
Well, there have been so many. I hate to cite one, but one that I always remember is Mr. Harry Seal, known then at the bar as Mr. Harry. And Mr. Harry had the big head of white hair and Matlock type looking fella. And I tried my first jury case against him in 1960. And I was so almost mesmerized with him, I could hardly pay attention to what I was doing. But he I guess and I tried other cases against him, and he was, in that case, I can remember being in his office, I don't know, next week, taking a deposition in a case involving one of his partners, Bubba Marcel, also a great trial lawyer. And Mr. Harry motioned me into his office and sitting me down and telling me, now, this is what you should do and what you should not do, which I thought was very helpful and very nice of him. And he was just a memorable character, and a lot of stories about him.
What about any personalities of particular judges?
Well, yeah, I remember so many of the judges, going back to Judge Bob Irwin, who was a presiding judge when I started, Judge William V. McDermott, Judge Hocklander, of course, Judge Thomas in the federal court, Judge Dan Thomas, who was the only judge there then. And I hate to mention some judges and leave others out, because we've had a lot of memorable and great judges. But the one thing I remember about them is that most of them were they're all helpful when I was starting out. And when I started out, we had to take appointments for our criminal cases, which was a good thing. We kind of griped about it at times, but it put you in the courtroom, and it got you experience in trying lawsuits and also meeting the judges and other lawyers, and that was something that was very helpful back then.
Where did you go to law school, and what was your most memorable experience there?
Went to law school at the University of Alabama, where I went to college. And I would say the most memorable experience while in law school was that I was selected to be on the national moot court team. And we won the Southeastern competition in Atlanta, and went on to New York for the competition put on by the New York City Bar. Our coach and advisor was then Professor Sam Beatty, and he's a character, as you know, and he was very helpful. And we lost in the semifinals in New York, and we had, with Sam Beatty and his wife, members of the court, Lieutenant Lee, me, and Arthur Stevens. And we were all married then, we had our wives, and we had one heck of a party in New York after we lost out. But that was a great experience, and one that gave me some confidence about being in the courtroom.
Who was the lawyer who most influenced you, and what interesting stories do you recall about him or her?
Well, again, there are a lot of those that I think influenced me, and I fortunately had a lot of lawyers who gave me advice and helped me when I was starting out and all along. But William Armbrecht was my senior partner, and Marshall DeMuy, senior to me, who I worked with a lot starting out in trying lawsuits, but in our firm. But other lawyers outside the firm too. As I say, I hate to mention just one or even two, but Charlie Arundel was helpful to me. Sam Pipes, Robert Cunningham, all good lawyers, great lawyers. And there are so many stories I can remember about them trying lawsuits with them, against them, and with them. And as I already mentioned, Mr. Harry Seal and Bubba Marcel. I don't know how many cases I tried against Bubba, and even had one with him. And you're asking about a story about
yes.
one? Okay, I'll tell a story about a case I had with Bubba Marcel. It involved a trial in which I represented the Burlington Northern Railroad, and Bubba Marsaw represented a truck driver in a small trucking company. The truck out here on Radcliffe Road ran into the third locomotive of the train in broad daylight, and it derailed the train, did a lot of damage, and I had seen Bubba out there in the evening news. He had been out there, and so I convinced the railroad to sue the trucking company before they could sue the railroad in the federal court, and we were in the federal court. So we were our client was the plaintiff, so we got to go first and last in the trial. And so Bubba, one of Bubba's pet sayings, and he had a lot of them, was, and when he'd make a point, he said, the other side would say something, had a position, and he'd always say, "And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that dog won't hunt." And so when we got ready for a closing argument in that case, I was trying the case with Norman Waldrop, my partner Norman Waldrop. So Norman was going to argue first, and Bubba, and he was going to be in the middle, and I was going to end up. So I told Norman before we started, I said, "Norman, whatever you say, you have got to say, that dog won't hunt." So sure enough, Norman got to a point, and there's an issue about the whistle blowing and so forth. And so at the right time, Norman said what Bubba had said about something. He said, "That dog won't hunt." And I was looking at Bubba, and I just couldn't. I just enjoyed so much seeing. He could have bitten nails. He was so upset about that. But anyway, that was a good experience.
What is the most interesting case that you have handled?
It's hard to pick out a single case, but I guess I'd have to say the Sunset Limited Amtrak derailment case, in the case in which, as you know, that the Amtrak passenger train north of Mobile here in Bioconot derailed at a bridge there, and our client, the towing company, had bumped the bridge. The plaintiff said we slammed into the bridge, and in that case, we represented the towing company, and there were 2 railroads involved as co-defendants. So we had 49 death cases and about 120 personal injury cases. We had lawyers from all over the country representing those plaintiffs and the railroads, and I was the lead trial counsel for the towing company and ended up as lead counsel for the railroads after we got a contribution. And so it was a very interesting case, and took approximately 7 years to resolve all those cases. So the accident was in September of 1993, and we tried the last cases in, I think it was August of 2000. So that was very interesting. We had a lot of issues. We were in the federal court primarily here in Mobile, but also in several state courts. And we ended up in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals and 5th Circuit Court of Appeals in some of those issues. So that was a very interesting case, and one I'll always remember.
What is your most memorable or humorous in-court experience?
I had a case in, this is probably 25 or 30 years ago, in federal court here in Mobile, where I represented the railroad. And the plaintiff was a fellow from Monroe County, and he had been in a honky-tonk called Blueberry Hill up in on the Monroe County, Escambia County line one night, drinking with his friends up there. And he was on a motorcycle, and he left Blueberry Hill, I don't know, midnight or something like that, on his motorcycle. And our train was stopped in the crossing at Huxford at the pole plant. And of course it was dark, and we had boxcars across the crossing, and there's no flash or anything there, just a crossbuck. And he ran into the boxcar, and he had some injuries. Fortunately, I guess because he'd been drinking, he wasn't hurt all that bad. But then some of his friends came up. They didn't see the accident. They came up behind him in their car from the Blueberry Hill, his drinking buddies. And the big issue at the trial was whether we had a conductor and a flagman out there, and according to them they had some lanterns, flashing lanterns. And the big issue was whether those lanterns were there and not, whether they were flashing lanterns. And so the plaintiff and also his friends who came up there who were witnesses for him were pretty unsavory characters in Monroe County. And they had several run-ins with the law. And I brought a deputy sheriff from Monroe County to testify as to the plaintiff's reputation for truthfulness. I've forgotten what rule that is, but anyway. So the deputy sheriff asked him the line of questions about what he was familiar with him and what's his reputation in the Monroe County community for telling the truth. And Judge Virgil Pittman was a judge in that case, and he said, "Now, Deputy Smith, whatever his name was, and you can't give, under our rules, you can't give any instances of the plaintiff's what he had done. You can only testify as to his whether his reputation is good or bad." And the deputy turned to the jury and said, "Judge, it's real bad." And then later in the case, when we were making closing arguments, I said to the jury when we were closing, I said, "You know, this case, it gets down to you have to make a choice whether you're going to believe these trainmen who were cold sober out there that night working for a living, or whether you're going to believe the Monroe County Mafia." And with that, the plaintiff's lawyer jumped up, object. And Judge Pittman, I think he was looking over the jury charges or something, and he said, what's your objection? And the plaintiff's lawyer said, my client was and our witnesses were the Monroe County Mafia. And Judge Pittman said, "Oh no, don't say that." That was memorable. We won that case, by the way.
What was your scariest legal experience, whether in law school, during the bar exam, or in court?
Well, I don't know about scary, but as you know, I've had several scary times with a lot of apprehension, and I'd have to say most of the times when I heard a jury knock, those were scary.
What changes have you observed in the practice of law since you were admitted in 1960 that you consider to have had the most profound impact on the practice of law or the legal system?
Well, the changes there've been a lot of changes. I guess one of the things is we've had such an increase in the number of lawyers. Just taking in our circuit in Mobile County, we've gone from approximately 200 to, when I started, 225 to 1,300 now. That's a big change. We obviously have a lot more women lawyers and minority lawyers, all of which is a good thing. You know, my partner Kathy Miller is president of the Mobile Bar now. When I started, we didn't have women-owned juries, and that's a change, and a good change. You asked whether it affected it. I think we were all wondering how it would affect. I'm not sure it's made a lot of difference in jury verdicts, because I think things went along very well with that development. There's a big development in technology in the courtrooms. We didn't have that. That's a big change. So those are some of the things I think have been a change in the practice.
And we have time, if you want to just add some more stories that you had thought about talking about.
Well, I could tell a lot of them, but I think I've given you the highlights, and I better stop there, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Oh.